I love books, and I love being outdoors. Sometimes, if you're lucky in life, you get to combine two of your passions. In this series, I'm looking at some of the books on the outdoors that have changed my life. Of course, taking people into the outdoors, it's important to have a philosophy of leadership, and a philosophy of nature, and a philosophy of introducing people to nature. But I think even more specifically, it's important to have a philosophy about rivers and river travel and canoeing. And in all those years of canoe guiding, my philosophy was guided by two aims. And the first aim was that people would fall in love with canoeing. And in fact, they would love canoeing so much that they would want to go canoeing again and again and again, and slowly develop their own level of skill and knowledge and technique and understanding. And my second aim was that people would fall in love with the river, or fall in love with the place that they were canoeing in. And you can't achieve those goals by just teaching people about the problems of the river. It's important knowledge, it's important to understand its history and some of its problems and issues. But it's more important to fall in love with a place and fall in love with a way of being in a place. So I did my master's degree in 1988 to 89 at the University of Calgary, and I was already a kayak instructor and competent raft guide and sea kayak paddler. I never got the opportunity to paddle a traditional open canoe, which is such a huge part of Canadian culture. But I did come across, of course, the films and writings of the great Bill Mason, and purchased a couple of his books. And the first of those, of course, was Path of the Paddle. His classic guide, he calls it an illustrated guide to the art of canoeing. He produced a series of black and white images in this book, which really broke down the skill and art of paddling. And once I'd returned to Australia and had a job at the La Trobe University at the Bendigo campus, in the dry, hot interior of Victoria, I used Mason's Path of the Paddle to teach myself the skill of canoeing. Being a good whitewater paddler in a kayak, it was pretty easy to adapt and learn skills like bow strokes and draw strokes and ferry strokes, and understanding the dynamics of water and the canoe hull in the water, the fundamental art of doing the J-stroke. But that's often as far as it goes in terms of instruction in Australia. But Mason included things like, an indigenous hunting stroke, a completely silent stroke. And that artistry to paddling really attracted me and taught me about the fact that there's much more to the art of paddling and being on a river than just executing a series of basic strokes. These strokes all have an origin, they're used for different purposes, they move the canoe in different ways. And so once I'd self-taught myself them, that's how I tried to teach my students to paddle. I taught them paddling solo as much as possible, so they'd have command of their own craft. And if the canoe went this way, that was because of them and not their partner. It was Mason's approach that for me started to elevate something like canoeing, even on flat water, from something like just an activity, a vehicle to get from A to B, to a philosophy where the skills you had, the way you moved your paddle and your boat and your body, was just as important as anything else. And right at the opening of the Path of the Paddle, he writes, "The canoe is the simplest, most functional, yet aesthetically pleasing object ever created." In my opinion, this is not a statement that is open to debate. It's a fact. It follows that if the canoe is the most beautiful work of human beings, then the art of paddling must rank right up there along with painting, poetry, music and ballet. He made a series of short films about his skillful approach to paddling, and it's right. You can look at those films and think it's ballet, you know, it's artistry. And those, along with his book, were my teacher for many years. And after Path of the Paddle, Mason wrote a second book, which I brought home with me, called Song of the Paddle. And that is really where he articulates his philosophy of being in a canoe and travelling the rivers and lakes of Canada. Some people hear the song in the quiet mist of a cold morning. Others hear it in the middle of roaring rapids. Sometimes the excitement drowns out the song. The thrills become all that matter as we seek one rapid after another. Sleeping, eating, living outdoors became something we do between rapids. But for other people, the song is loudest in the evening when they're sitting in front of the tent, basking in the campfire's warmth. This is when I hear it loudest. After I've paddled and portaged many miles to some distant, hidden place. Clearly articulated an ambition about what you should aim for in the outdoors. To be at home, to be able to listen to the song of the river, to be able to listen to the song of the activity. And there were photos and stories in Mason's book that absolutely fired my imagination. There was a photo of him possibly, but it could have been someone else, paddling well offshore. It could have been in a lake or the ocean, with a bommy, a big wave breaking on a rock or a reef beyond the canoe. And so of course I grabbed a canoe and went down to the local ocean and tried to paddle around, not so much in the surf, but in the swell and offshore. It just wasn't limited to the idea that a canoe was for one thing. For him it was a way of moving between places, a way of life, a way of being. When you've got a big expanse of water to cross, it is a bit of a mind game. You've got to pick your target and just find your groove. Get nice and efficient with your power stroke and your correction with a J or some other form of correction stroke or steering stroke. And then settle in for hours and hours of paddling. And just enjoy being observant and letting the body do what it knows to do. And it was from Mason where I got the idea for the tucker box. I didn't invent the idea of having a wooden tucker box in my canoe out of nowhere. I saw it in his books and I saw it in one of his films, probably his most famous film, Water Walker. And rather than stack your food away in a couple of plastic dry bags, have it in a tucker box and just keep pulling stuff out of the tucker box while you're traveling or while you're camping. Stacking just a box full of ingredients and making meals and snacks and drinks out of them as you go. That seemed to me to be a much more interesting way to be in the outdoors than the normal way of having all of your pre-prepared meals packed away in their little snap-lock plastic bags in a plastic dry bag. Once I started taking students out on those trips, of course I found sections of the Murray River that were really beautiful places to paddle a canoe. I was teaching a subject called the philosophy of outdoor education, and we had a trip in that philosophy, a 4 or 5 day paddle. It could have been almost anywhere, but because I was committed to using paddling open canoes, we came up to the Murray, and I re-engaged with the Murray River, which was an important river in my own family's history. When the Wattchows cleared the block in Waikerie, they stacked the wood by the river at Wattchow's Landing. The steamboat skippers would call in and buy loads of wood. And that's how the Wattchows began to get established. Clear the land, cut the wood, sell the wood, start farming. Hard work, but that's part of the story of the river. But if you go somewhere, you need a way to find yourself around. And of course you can grab a topographical map, or you could grab a road map on the Murray if you needed to. I came across Maureen Wright's book of river charts, and Maureen Wright hand drew her river charts for the Murray River. There are beautiful little sketches of things you might see along the way, but the real beauty is in the depiction of the river. It's so similar to the old paddle wheeler captain's charts for the river. Well downstream where my family farmed on the river, some of the maps still mark Wattchow's Landing. They're not in Maureen Wright's river charts, didn't extend that far downstream. But in South Australia there is the River Pilot, the official pilot or guide for boat travellers on the river. And of course they need to mark snags and bends and beaches and currents and channels and obstacles and boat ramps and towns. The beauty of these charts is that they were for river travellers. They were not for speedboaters, they were not for people going fishing, they were for people who wanted to travel slowly up and down the river. And so you could plan your day around those charts. And so you used the sun and your shadow as your direction finders. And that was enough, alongside Maureen Wright's beautiful depictions of the meandering river. And being able to collect features along the way like snags and pumps and willow trees and boat ramps and beaches and bends in the river with steep cut banks. It was a beautiful way to navigate, and actually taught me to be fairly observant while moving downriver. So nice once you're up and away. Got everything you need in the boat. Camping gear and your book to read. Or your tucker in the tucker box. And a brew. Just living out of the canoe. I think it was more than just Bill Mason's skillful and beautiful approach to paddling that captured my attention. There was a passage of prose from Path of the Paddle, one of Mason's stories that I'd typed out and pasted on my door when I was the coordinator of paddling at La Trobe University, Bendigo. And it goes like this. A long time ago, as I sat before my fire on the rocky shore of a northern lake, a canoe appeared out of the mist, propelled by an Indian fisherman, on his way to tend his nets. The poetry of motion was indescribable. He paddled effortlessly with his whole body, yet he went across the lake and disappeared into the mist faster than I would have thought possible. He looked as if he could have kept up that pace forever, without tiring. I leapt into my canoe and tried to emulate his technique. I've been trying ever since, with less than perfect results. The reason is obvious. He had probably paddled every day of his life from break up to freeze up, and I don't. It's as simple as that. Not many would put Mason in the same standing in the pantheon of North American nature writers like Thoreau and Muir and Leopold and Rachel Carson. but I think they should. I think he's a great writer.